With the declining success of the Mega Man series, Capcom wanted to reinvent the franchise to prevent it from getting stale. By adding a wide array of mechanics and fine-tuning the previously established ones, we received what many consider to be one of the best 2D platformers of all time. This is the Mega Man X Iceberg. Not the same Mega Man. The character from the Mega Man X series is often confused as older Mega Man by those who are not very familiar with the franchise. However, the character featured in the spin-off is in fact a different person altogether. X is an upgraded version of the character that we will see in the mainline franchise, designed to appear older, have a more mature storyline, and be more sentient than the previous model. Almost the Chosen One. The popular character Zero that debuted in Mega Man X was in fact meant to be the protagonist of the series. However, throughout development, the creator instead decided to make Mega Man X the protagonist and make Zero a supporting character who serves as the deuteragonist. The reason behind this was a fear of fan backlash, which could have occurred by sidelining the main character of the series. Fortunately for the character, he did end up getting his own spin-off games called Mega Man Zero, cameoed in many other games over time too. Most notably Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where players often complained about him being straight up broken. First time for everything. The first boss in the game, which is Vile in his ride armor, is the series' smallest opening boss stage. This is because every other opening boss stage happens to be massive and takes at least half of the screen in most cases. Additionally, on an interesting note, the game is also the first one in the series to show a preview of the boss levels on the Stage Select screen. Mistranslated. Usually, when video games are re-released as a part of a collection on newer consoles, there are typically changes that try to improve the game in several ways. Oddly enough, the opposite happened with Mega Man X, as the translation changes several things for the worse. For example, the voice clip for Hadoken is removed, and there is a strange error that makes Sigma say, "Why you done this to us?" once he is defeated at the end of the game. On another note, X says "damn" in a conversation in the opening of the game. For those who want that tiny bit of extra edge, fans speculate that these errors exist as a part of the abandoned plan of retranslating the games in the collection. Adaptations. Due to the immense success, the game was adapted into other Mega Man related media. The story was first adapted into the manga form as part of the Irregular Hunter Rockman X, and then it was adapted once more as a manga simply called Rockman X. Although the first adaptation was faithful to the source material, the second one was particularly darker and contained themes of death, cursing, sexual overtones, and religious symbolism. Furthermore, the Mega Man series of comic books by Archie Comics integrated several elements from Mega Man X before the series went on a hiatus. The Mega Man number 34 and 35 storyline, The X Factor, was an adaptation of the Journal of Dr. Kane from Mega Man X and was originally intended to lead up to the story of the game. And lastly, a novel rightly called Rockman X the Novel, A Regular's Report, was released which retold the story of Mega Man X. Remake. Although Mega Man X has been released on many different platforms over time since its original release on the SNES, it was completely remade from the ground up as well. Once the PlayStation Portable was released, and the team was told to make a new Mega Man game for it, the development team debated on whether or not they should create a Mega Man X or something else. Eventually, they decided that it would be better to go back to the series' roots and improve upon the game that started it all. Eventually, 2005 saw the release of Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, which was a remake that remained faithful to the gameplay and storyline of the original game. But it also had a complete graphical overhaul with 3D characters and backgrounds, a remixed soundtrack, redone voice acting, and even anime cutscenes. On top of all that, the game had several additions to the gameplay, an extra mode that allows players to select Vile as a playable character, and even an OVA called The Day of Sigma, that served as a prequel to the game's storyline. These additions to the game allowed players to experience the story from the perspective of the villains too, and not just the protagonist, which makes the storyline seem much less black and white. Although the game did not sell as well as the company had hoped for, It still received almost as much critical acclaim as the original SNES game did, which helped it greatly in re-releases throughout time. Map Editor. Not many games came with a built-in map editor in the SNES era of video games, but Mega Man X is one of those that surprisingly had one. It can be activated using the Pro Action Replay codes, and players are allowed to build maps of their choice. It's really nothing complex or fancy, but it's a fun way to kill some time. You need 2 controllers to properly use it, as the functions are split between the 2 gamepads when they are attached. Cut content. Like most games with a passionate development team, Mega Man X has a bunch of unused content. There is a third type of Angle-Urge boss in the game who has the ability to blow air at X once encountered. Since the first version of the boss sucks air in, and the second one both sucks it in and blows it out, it's speculated that this unused version of the boss might have originally been intended as a boss to use in the middle. The palette that is used if you use the Pro Action Replay version is incorrect since it's pulled from a place that is not meant to be used. Then we have the Hoganmar enemy type that jumps once its shield has been destroyed. Although the version of the character that is in the final game might have this character too, but it's impossible to find out since the shield cannot be destroyed. Afterwards, also, there is a jellyfish enemy that has completed animations, but does not appear in the game whatsoever. Both the Hoganmar type that is unused and this jellyfish enemy were shown in the 1993 Space World trailer for the game. Of course, they were eventually removed from the final release. Lastly, there is an unused object with corrupted graphics that spawns Tombots, some random pieces of graphics that are never loaded into the game, a bunch of unused Zero palettes, unused item drops, an unused audio file, some unused text, and an entire unused boss entrance room that is a duplicate of the Launch Octopus boss entrance room, and it cannot be accessed in the game without using cheats. Regional differences. The very first regional difference for Mega Man X is, of course, the main title itself. The game is called Rockman X in Japan, while the international versions retain the Mega Man X name. Then we have a bunch of name changes on the screens that include character information, some changed titles, and a different splash screen. The bosses also have altered names as well, such as Spark Mandriller being called Spark Mandrill in the international release. Bugs. Mega Man X has several notable bugs, some of which are game-breaking and were fixed in later releases. Firstly, there's a powered-up shotgun ice platform that does not shatter if it's used to kill a boss, which leads to a bug where the player gets credited for defeating Storm Eagle after dying. Then there's the bug in which, if Sigma and X are killed at the same time, even though the boss is defeated, the player cannot control X again, and the ending cutscene cannot be advanced. There are several passwords that can be used to start the game with 0 to maximum life and every weapon, if the player is willing to cheat to get such things early. And lastly, X can walk on the ceiling in the beginning of the Flame Mammoth room if the player follows certain conditions. This leads to climbing up on an invisible wall that leads to a central room that has a corrupted palette and enemy graphics, and the boundary is incorrect too. All of these things were fixed in the European version, but the Japanese and North American releases go back and forth on having and not having these bugs. Creative copy protection. Mega Man X is one of the very few video games that tackle the issue of piracy with creativity. The game constantly tries to detect whether it's being run on a copier, and if the game realizes that it's being run on a pirated copy, there are several things that go wrong to purposely ruin the player's experience. For example, you might lose all upgrades as soon as you enter a stage, acquiring a power-up might throw you back to the beginning of a level, getting hit 128 times might add random inputs or nerfs to X, and there are other similar changes which mess up the gameplay in one way or another. Although this method of preventing the game from being copied was fairly useful, it started to cause cases of false positives too, in which people who purchased the game in Japan would suffer from these issues because the game would incorrectly assume that there is an error in place. Eventually, Capcom fixed this by physically rewiring the game's cartridge, which disabled the copy protection, and a new version of the protection was reinstated in subsequent releases of the game. Glitches and exploits. Game-breaking bugs are not the only type of effort that exists in the game's programming, as casual glitches and exploits are present too. In Boomer Kuwanger's tower, due to programming issues with hit detection, the spikes in the area don't damage the player if they touch the spike after being hit by an enemy. Additionally, if you jump on the spike, pressing the button once more will nullify any damage taken. Detailed continuity. The stages in Mega Man X change based on the order you choose to fight the bosses. For example, if you beat the Chill Penguin first, the lava in the Flame Mammoth stage is frozen, and if you beat the Launch Octopus, Sting Chameleon stage will be partially flooded. These are just two examples, and there are many small details like these found if the player pays attention. These details are also present in the weaknesses that the bosses have, with a quick example being the fact that the Chill Penguin goes up in flames if attacked with fire. Minor secrets. You can get Zero Buster as a weapon in the Sigma Stage 1 if you do not pick up the arm power-up in Flame Mammoth stage. Ryu's iconic Hadouken can be obtained in Armored Armadillo stage if you have the heart tanks, sub-tanks, enemy weapons, and power-ups. Once you're in this stage, you can reach the final minecart. You have to jump and climb up the wall. On top, there is a large energy unit that you need to grab, and then you'll have to jump into the pit and die. Then the player has to repeat the process 5 times, and eventually a capsule will appear, which X can enter in, and inside the player learns the Hadouken move. As mentioned previously, the sound effect for it was removed in the re-releases. Honor among thieves. Sigma cannot be hurt with any weapons in the game aside from the upgraded X Blaster and the defensive rolling shield. The reason that his final form cannot be damaged by any other weapons is because Sigma specifically built this new form to be immune to any attacks that have been picked up from his minions. So, why can the defensive rolling shield hurt him? The reason behind this is traced into the lore, as Armored Armadillo was his most loyal and trusted henchman. Thus, Sigma saw no need to give himself immunity to his attacks, since he never feared that he would turn against him. Boss Order. Mega Man X can almost be seen as a customizable experience, and we're not referring to the level editor. The game lets you pick the order in which you fight certain bosses, and the order that you pick matters a lot for a number of reasons. For example, if you don't fight Chill Penguin first, you might find other bosses more challenging to beat since you won't have the dash ability, which is crucial to the game's difficulty. And if you fight some of the harder bosses first, the game becomes incredibly challenging to the player in general. And last but not least, there are certain bonuses for the player if they put themselves through such situations, since certain weapons allow you to breeze through the rest of the game easily since you got them earlier than you should have. Fan theories. There are 2 prominent fan theories for Mega Man X. The first one is more of a debate, as fans question whether or not those infected with the Maverick virus can really be called evil. After all, Sigma used to be a good guy until he was infected with the virus, and then he tried to take over the world. And the same goes for most people that work for that cause, as the virus removed parts of their mind that would make them stay away from such actions. Thus, it can be considered quite dark when you have to kill them all to beat the game, as they're not too different from zombies, except that perhaps they could have been saved with an antidote. The second fan theory focuses on Dr. Wily and his connection to Zero. Although it's no secret that Dr. Wily created Zero as a force to use against his enemies, he was unable to do that due to how uncontrollable Zero was initially, and then ended up locking him away. However, some theorists believe that Dr. Wily has been dead since Mega Man 3, and had since been living as robotic copies of himself. Perhaps that's why Roboenza disease infects him in Mega Man 10, rather than the virus being something that evolved to infect humans as well. It is believed that the last and most ideal body for Dr. Wily, created for himself, was Zero. And the reason that Zero remains a good guy despite slowly regaining Dr. Wily's memories is because Dr. Wily had somewhat redeemed himself in the end of Mega Man 10. Thus, the violent tendencies of Zero are Dr. Wily unable to control his past urges. But ultimately, he ended up helping humanity whether he liked it or not, since Zero became a good person. And of course, his evil personality continues to live on as the Sigma virus. and the true Zero that Sigma tried to awaken at one point in the Mega Man X series was supposed to be Dr. Wily's true self.
Like this video, and subscribe to Maker.